Welcome back to another episode of Dueker Sports. I'm joined, as always, by Christian Lunday, the best co-host anyone could ever ask for, and we are talking about the Super Bowl. We're going to break down everything regarding this weekend's game. It's going to be an epic game. I thought that we would go through. We're going to obviously make our predictions with who we think is going to win the game. We're going to give you our Super Bowl MVP pick as well. And we're going to definitely be in great detail explaining to you why we're picking the team that we think is going to win. And I guess I'll just go ahead and jump right on into it. And I'll open with my game prediction. I am, of course, without a doubt, taking the Philadelphia Eagles in this game by a score of 28-24. Now, here's why I'm taking the Eagles, and I'm a big numbers guy. I love statistics. Um, I I don't just say things because I feel them, although sometimes I do. But I mostly they're all most of the things that I say I like to have supported by the numbers, and I think the numbers definitely support the Philadelphia Eagles in this game. Uh, First, I'll start in a broad sense, and I'll work my way more specifically. So I think you look at these two teams and you break them down by position group. And Christian and I were just talking about this before the show, but in my opinion, I think you go through the position groups, and I think the only advantages that the Chiefs have in terms of position groups is going to be at quarterback, obviously because they have Patrick Mahomes, and then obviously a tight end where they have Travis Kelsey. Now this isn't a position group, but I will include it in coaching, and I think that advantage also goes to the Chiefs. So in my opinion, those are the three advantages that the Chiefs are going to have in this game. I think that the receiving core, the running backs, the offensive line, the defensive line, the linebackers, and the secondary, and even the special teams, I think all go to the Eagles. So now I think that obviously you would think, okay, the Eagles won significantly more categories. I'm not the reason why I think it's still going to be a close game is because when you look at the three advantages the Chiefs have, they couldn't be greater advantages. You have three of the best people of all time doing what they do with Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelsey, and Andy Reid. Those three advantages alone, especially when you talk about quarterback and head coach, massive. Even in terms like I think the defensive coordinator matchup is actually pretty even. Both teams have a pretty good defensive coordinator. I've been very hard on Jonathan Gannon in the past, but he's honestly done a phenomenal job this year. Hats off to him. But now I'm going to get a little bit more specific, and it's breaking down these statistics. So first, I want to talk about offenses because these are the top two offenses in the National Football League. When you look at the Eagles, they finished the season third in total yards, ninth in passing yards, fifth in rushing yards, and second in points. And then you go look at the Chiefs. They finished first in total yards, first in passing yards. They were 20th in rushing yards, and they were first in points. So you have two teams. One team finished first in total yards, one finished third, one finished first in points, one finished second. So to me, without a doubt, these are the top two offenses in the National Football League. The Chiefs' advantage is obviously in passing yards because of Patrick Mahomes. I think to me it kind of balances itself out because you look at the Eagles may have finished ninth in passing yards, but they did finish, and I'm actually surprised that they only finished fifth in rushing yards because I'm still not sure how they're not number one given what I've seen this season. But they somehow finished fifth in rushing yards. I do think they have the best rushing attack, and I think that's why they finished ninth in passing yards and not higher up. Also, the injury to Jalen Hurts, I think definitely – it was only 2 games, but I definitely think that it had a huge impact on that. But that's – so right off the bat, I'm going to point out what I see as a major weakness going into this game. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to – if I tell you this point, it's going to make it even more obvious. Real quick, looking at the defenses, the Eagles finished second in total yards, first in passing yards, 17th in rushing, and 8th in points. Whereas the Chiefs finished 11th in total yards, 18th in passing yards, 8th in rushing, 16th in points. Now, I say this because the most important thing here, the weakness for the Kansas City Chiefs on offense is without a doubt the rushing attack. They finished 20th in rushing Just last week, we saw them struggle mightily. I can't remember the exact numbers, but they only had 20 something rushing yards, I think, the entire game. And I think it was off of 15 carries, if I'm not mistaken. So they're inconsistent, I will say. I've seen Pacheco for sure have some great runs this season. He did it in the divisional round. He had the 39-yard touchdown run. But I think they've shown an inability to run the ball on a consistent basis. And that does not bode well because now that's going to pit your number one passing offense in the league against the number one pass defense in the league. And while I think that's one heck of a matchup, and I think we're all excited to watch that go down, I think you do not want to, because if you fall into a one-dimensional offense as the Kansas City Chiefs, that's not going to bode well for them in this game because I think you allow the Eagles pass rush to just pin their ears back and hunt Patrick Mahomes throughout the course of this game. And then you also take into consideration how good that secondary is. You just looking at guys like James Bradbury and Darius Slay, who dominated this season. James Bradbury was the number one corner in the league when it comes to opposing completion percentage, I believe. When the quarterbacks targeted him, they were only 40 of 87. So under 50% when targeting him. And then he's our number two corner, technically. Darius Slay is our number one, and he wasn't far behind him. He only gave up 54.6% completion when he was targeted. He typically matches up with the number one receivers. And then you look in our secondary, in our safety positions, and you have C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who led the league in interceptions, obviously. He definitely has been known to blow coverage on occasion. Then we have Reed Blankenship, who has kind of taken over the starting position after having to fill in for C.J. Gardner-Johnson. He played decently well, and he actually got promoted. He'll be their starting safety in this game. But I think you just look at that. I think you do not, if you're the Kansas City Chiefs, you do not want to have Patrick Mahomes having to drop back 50 times a game, especially if the Eagles are sensing that as the case. Because if they start to pin their ears back and come after Mahomes, I think he's going to be in a world of trouble. Now, when you look at the offensive line play, I think the Eagles definitely have a huge advantage there. I think they're the best offensive line in the National Football League. I mentioned it in our last show. Pro Football Focus ranked all 5 of our starting offensive linemen in the top 7 at their position. They have 2 players ranked second. That, of course, being Lane Johnson, who does not get nearly enough respect, and then I almost said Lane Johnson twice. That's how good. Jason Kelce, obviously being the other, especially given the Kelce Bowl, a lot more people are familiar with that name. But the Chiefs' offensive line is not bad. Pro Football Focus ranked them 4th best. And obviously they have Creed Humphreys, who's played phenomenally well. He's the number 1 rated center in the National Football League, according to Pro Football Focus. I'm pretty sure for the 2nd year in a row. And I think, when it comes to the all-pro teams, it comes down to a little bit of a veteran bias of why he might be getting left off. But this guy, he's proven capable of really just being the anchor for that offensive line. I think he's going to have a long and successful career playing for the Kansas City Chiefs. It's not the left side of their offensive line that concerns me. You've got Orlando Brown. He's played pretty well all season. Joe Tooney's at left guard. It's the right side of the offensive line that worries me. Trey Smith is a mediocre at best starting right guard in the National Football League. And then Andrew Wiley as the right tackle has quite honestly not been good at all. You mentioned this in the last show in regards to how he's played, especially in passing situations where he's allowed 9 sacks and 49 pressures. Now, if you want a comparison, and this is just between right tackles, but if you want to see, Lane Johnson was the number 2 rated right tackle in the league. He gave up 0 sacks. He had 500 and something passing snaps this season. He gave up 0 sacks and only 9 pressures, compared to 9 sacks and 49 pressures. So obviously, I think the Eagles' offensive line is significantly better. And you also mentioned Hassan Reddick lines up on that side of the line. So they're going to have their hands full, and especially considering you have 4 guys on that team. He finished 2nd in the league in sacks, and then you have Josh Sweat, you have Brandon Graham, and you have Hassan Reddick, or almost Hassan Reddick. I keep saying people's names twice. Um, Javon Hargrave, he had 12 and a half sacks. All four of those guys had over 11 or more sacks. And then you look at Fletcher Cox, who had 7 sacks, uh, and that's our fifth guy. So we really have the Eagles have 5 guys just rotating, who's rushing the passer, and then they obviously brought in defensive tackle depth through free agency right at the end of the season, as well, and also to help in the run defense. But to me, I just think you look at the defensive line of the Eagles compared to the Chiefs' offensive line. I think it's a mismatch. I think that's what this game is really going to come down to is who controls the trenches, and I think the Eagles can do that on both sides of the ball. The Chiefs were obviously second in sacks compared to the Eagles in first. The Chiefs, like all these strengths and weaknesses, these two teams really don't have that many weaknesses, quite frankly, on either side of the ball. The Chiefs, I honestly, you could say that the Chiefs being 20th in rushing offense is misrepresented by the fact that they're that good at passing the ball. Why in the world would you waste your time doing anything else? But I just think that the Eagles can control the trenches. And then when you look at like turnover differential, the Eagles were fifth in the league, and takeaways they're also fifth in the league, and fewest in terms of fewest giveaways. And when you look at the Chiefs, they're 23rd in turnover differential, and that's because they were 22nd in takeaways, and they were, I believe, 19th in giveaways. So you look at who can control the game in the trenches, and it's the Eagles. You look at who's going to be able to limit turnovers, and so far this season it's been the Eagles, and who's going to force the turnovers, and also the advantage goes to the Eagles. And then if you even look at special teams and you compare the return games, the Eagles have a substantial lead. The Chiefs are actually this season one of the worst teams in the league in terms of kick and punt returns. And then obviously we know the woes that Sky Moore had early on. I think Kadarius Toney. I think the Chiefs really just were like, hey, our offense is good enough. Just call a fair catch and just don't make a mistake. Like if you're being recognized, you're doing something wrong as a returner. I feel like in this game, I think they should err on the side of playing it conservatively, at least to begin the game, in terms of the run game or the return game. But even if you look at the field goal kicking, that also benefits the Philadelphia Eagles as well this year. Harrison Butker obviously has dealt with an injury off and on all season. It seems like he's having his worst year since he's entered the league. He's kicking his field goal success rate is 75%. You look at Jake Elliott's and his is 87%. He's one of the most accurate kickers in the league right now. Both of them are about the same. Neither of them have the strongest legs, but they're both capable kickers from 50-plus yards. Obviously, Butker did have that one ridiculous kick. Was it 64 yards?
Something like that, yeah.
I think it was against the Raiders.
He definitely has a strong leg.
Yeah. I didn't say he didn't have a strong leg. I said he doesn't have the strongest leg.
He's up there.
But I think, I don't know, he's definitely been more inaccurate this year than he has been in years past. Historically speaking, he's been one of the better kickers in the National Football League. But this is the second consecutive year that his field goal percentage in terms of success rate has gone down. And Jake Elliott has been pretty consistently solid as well. You don't see Jake Elliott kick a lot. That's because the Eagles like to go for a ridiculous amount. He only finished with one fewer field goal attempt than Harrison Butker, but you think about all the games that Harrison Butker missed, and he only attempted one more field goal attempt than he did. That's because the Eagles love to go for it. Obviously, anytime they lined up and it's fourth down and short, you know they're going to come out there and run the quarterback sneak. They have over a 90% success rate on 4th and 1 or shorter because of that reason. So I just look at these. That's all for the numbers I'm going to throw at you. But I think the numbers substantially support the fact that the Eagles are the better team in this game. Now, like I mentioned earlier, it's not to discredit the Chiefs in any way, and also it's not to overlook them either because, like I said, you have Patrick Mahomes who's going to win MVP. You have Andy Reid who's one of the top coaches of all time. You have Travis Kelce who's one of the best tight ends of all time. Those three guys all are masterminds, and it's going to be really tough. I think the Eagles' pass defense is going to have their hands full in this game for sure. But I just think it's kind of unfortunate for Chiefs fans in that team because I think that really the Chiefs' offensive strength is going to go straight against the Eagles' strength. And I think that does not bode well for them in this game. The Eagles, if they have a weakness on defense, is definitely their run defense. I think, let's see, they finished 17th in rushing defense this year. Uh, and I just, if the Chiefs are going to have to try to run a balanced offensive approach in this game, because if they do not, I think that they're going to get. Not only do I think they lose, I think if they become one dimensional, I think they're going to get smoked in this game because of just that right there, just playing against their strength against the Eagles' strength. They're going to need Pacheco to play the best game he's played all season if they want to win this game. And then you look at the other side, it's kind of the same way for the Chiefs. Their rushing defense was ranked 8th this year, and they're going to be going against that obviously very talented run attack from the Eagles. It's kind of the same way they're playing into that, but I don't think the Chiefs' run defense is quite as good as the Eagles' pass defense is. So I'm not that worried about that. Uh, I think for the Eagles, though, I think it's the same story. I think they're going to need to run a balanced approach. I think you need to bully the Chiefs secondary a little bit in this game because the Eagles have one of the best receiving corps in the National Football League. Obviously, they have A.J. Brown, who top 5 receiver this year easily. And then you have Devontae Smith opposite him, which is just a lethal combination. He's one of the best route runners I think in the league. He is one of the most sure-handed receivers, and then AJ Brown is just an absolute beast, and he's difficult to handle down the field big time. Then you add in the fact that they have Dallas Goedert, who's going to kind of slice you up across the middle, and the Chiefs come into this game. They're very young in the secondary, and outside L'Jarius Sneed's their, in my opinion, by far their best secondary player. Um, I would imagine, I don't know, you know way more about the Chiefs than I do, that he's going to shadow A.J. Brown in this game, or he may not because they have two extremely good receivers on the outside. But I think the Eagles receivers are a massive mismatch, in my opinion, for the Chiefs secondary. So I think that if the Eagles can attack that, I honestly think that the Chiefs will have to drop back in support of their pass defense because I don't think they're going to be able to handle one-on-one coverage with the receivers for sure. And I think either A, they're going to have their safeties back way deep, which is going to allow us to kill their run defense and also attack them in the intermediate passing game as well. I just look at this game and I don't know. I just think that the Eagles, in terms of all around talent and team wise, they just have way too many pluses on their side of the pros and cons sheet. I think that the Eagles will definitely win this game. If they don't, I'm going to be pretty surprised. But I think it's still going to be a close game despite everything that I just said. And I think, honestly, I said 28-24. When I looked at the numbers, I kind of used the numbers to create a score in my mind. And when I look at the numbers, that's how it turned out. I'm honestly would not be surprised at all to see both of these teams score over 30 points in this game. I could see it easily becoming a shootout. It'll be very interesting to see how these teams play, especially in terms of game planning. Are they going to run balanced approaches? Because I could see the Eagles come out being very aggressive in the passing game, and the Chiefs always come out aggressive in the passing game. And if that happens, if this comes into a shootout, I don't. We might witness the highest scoring Super Bowl in NFL history. That's how good these offenses are. You have the top 2 offenses in the league. I think it's going to be one heck of a game. But now I'm curious to hear what Mr. Lunday has for us in terms of his predictions.
Well, let me tell you. After the AFC Championship, I texted a few people and I said, if we are without Juju Smith-Schuster, Kadarius Toney, you know, uh, you know, Pacheco was banged up at the end of that game. You know, if we're without these guys, L'Jarius Sneed and Willie Gay, if we're without these guys, we have no chance. We have no chance. And it's nice to see that, you know, at the beginning of this week, looks like everyone practiced, everyone's healthy enough, is how I put it. And I have more confidence this week than I had last week. Part of that is because I think the odds are so stacked against us as far as if you measure each level of the team by position group, um, most of it goes in favor of the Eagles. I think the odds are so stacked against us that it actually might work in our favor. I think if you have the Chiefs as the favorite, you're wrong. We're the underdog, and I don't think we get to play that card very often. And I think I'm gonna show you just how much these odds are stacked against us. But you know what? They're not excuses. They're obstacles to be overcome. All right. Philly had the third best pass rush in terms of sacks all time, behind the 84 Bears with 72 and the 1989 Vikings with 71. Brandon Graham had 11 sacks in the regular season. He's on a tear. He's had 8 sacks in the last 9 games. Hassan Reddick, we all know what this guy's done. An all-pro caliber player. I can't believe the Cardinals let him go. I'm sure they're kicking themselves in the foot. 16 sacks in the regular season, has balled out in the playoffs. Josh Sweat, 11 sacks in the regular season. Fletcher Cox, the old man in that room, alongside Robert and Ndamukong Suh, had 7 sacks this year, 5 in the last 9 games. Javon Hargrave, 11 sacks in the regular season. This is an all-time level pass rush, the likes of which we have not seen in literal decades. Um, Not to mention their ball hawking secondary. CJ Gardner Johnson had 6 interceptions this year. Darius Slay had 3. Darius Slay made the Pro Bowl this year. Their pass defense rating was 81.6, which is third best in the NFL this year. 17 total interceptions, was tied fourth in the NFL this year. They held TEs, the position group that we know goes to the Chiefs. They held TEs to their fifth lowest passer rating, 80.6, and they only allowed 3 touchdowns to 4 interceptions when passes were thrown to tight ends. They held wide receivers to an 81.7 passer rating. That's fifth best in the NFL. You mentioned James Bradbury. Only allowed a 54.7 passer rating when targeted. That was second best in the NFL this year, and only allowed a 45.9% completion percentage. Uh, just to make things worse, this isn't a bias against the Chiefs. I'm worried that this might affect the outcome of the game for both teams because this guy has historically called penalties against the Eagles and Chiefs at unprecedented levels compared to the rest of the league. He led the league in penalties called in 2022, 2021, and he was second in 2020. This is Carl Cheffers. He has a poor record penalizing the Eagles. He's routinely penalized the Chiefs for 10 plus penalties and 90 plus yards. I think each of the last 3 or 4 games that he's had with the Chiefs. Uh, Not to mention one of the biggest plays that got some of the most criticism this year was the uh, roughing the passer call against Chris Jones when Chris Jones sacked Derek Carr and took the ball away. He waved that off, called it roughing the passer, faced boos, and the next penalty he called, his voice was cracking because I think he was embarrassed. He assessed the Chiefs this year for a record, or actually, the last time we had a Super Bowl appearance, Carl Cheffers was also the referee in that game, and he called a record 8 penalties for 95 yards against the Chiefs in the first half of the Super Bowl. We ended up finishing with like 10 or 11 penalties for over 100 yards in that Super Bowl. My question for Carl Cheffers is how will this affect the game as a whole in a negative way if you keep stopping the game due to BS penalties on both sides? He's had a bias, it seems like, against the Eagles too, calling them for several penalties. I think there's a story about both teams where their defensive players are like going to the locker room, like asking reporters, please tell me if you saw that as a penalty on the replay because I couldn't see it. They're wondering what this guy's looking at. So I think that has a factor against the game. I think another factor working against the Chiefs, our young secondary. They're not rookies anymore. They're veterans because of how late it is in the season, but they're still inexperienced in a game like this. And I know that the Eagles wide receivers are too, but that's established talent. Trent McDuffie, probably the most established rookie we have. Outside of that, it's Jalen Watson and Joshua Williams, a 4th rounder and a 7th rounder that aren't supposed to be here, frankly. And they're going against one of the best wide receivers in football, easily top 5. You can make an argument he was the best wide receiver in football. I wouldn't agree to that argument, but you can make the argument. That's how good he is. We have to cover that guy. We have to cover the Slim Reaper himself in the NFL, Devontae Smith. We have to cover Dallas Goedert. These are young guys having to take on probably the hardest assignment outside of the Bengals they faced this year. And that's going to be daunting, especially with their inexperience and nerves getting in the way. We only have a few guys on the defense that are from Super Bowl 54. There aren't many from that side of the football on the team anymore. So that's another thing working against us. Also, like you said, run defense for us is also not a strength for us, and we're going against the best rushing team in football um, because of their three-headed monster right now. You've got Jalen Hurts, who's one of the best, if not the best, rushing quarterback in football this year. You've got Miles Sanders, who had 1,000 yards rushing season. You have Kenneth Gainwell, who we talked about before we started this video about how well he's played recently. Boston Scott's not to be overlooked. This offensive line opens holes that my grandma can literally walk through if she really wanted to. And she's no longer on this earth. That's how big these holes are. So, this offensive line, also one of the best of all time, at least in recent memory, since I've started watching football back in the 90s, late 90s. I wasn't really that sentient back then, but I can tell you a good offensive line at 5 years old. And this is one of them. But I also feel like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson this year. It doesn't matter. I'm picking the Chiefs 31-24, and the score seems farther away than what I think the game actually will be. And that's because I think it's going to come down to the final minutes, if not seconds. The major weakness to me, besides the running attack against the defense, is screens, especially against screens with running backs, where they actually have allowed a 95.2 passer rating, which is 19th best in the league. It's below average. And if you remember, before heading into the playoffs, there's a certain guy named Jerick McKinnon who had 9 consecutive receiving touchdowns when entering the playoffs. I think there's going to be more of that. I think what helps us to this advantage, I think, is being overlooked, is the Eagles are very familiar with this back in the Brian Westbrook days. Who's the best screen game head coach of all time? That would be Andy Reid, and he's on the other side of the field. I think that works against this Eagles defense. Mahomes, blitz Mahomes. He's the best quarterback in the NFL statistically when being blitzed. Move him outside the pocket. He's been the best quarterback outside the pocket in the NFL this year. He's best when just being blitzed inside the pocket, not being blitzed. He's the best quarterback in the NFL statistically this year. And then I went back and I looked what kind of level this is often used to discredit this Eagles team. And I don't think this should be happening. But I did go back and look at the level of competition. I look back at all the games where a team scored 30 or more points against this Eagles team. The Lions scored 35 points against this team. Jared Goff had his best year, I think, of his career this year and was the 5th best scoring offense in football, the Detroit Lions. That's probably one of the shocks of the centuries. The Commanders scored 32 points against this team. They're the 24th best scoring offense. I'm sure not all of those points came from the offense, but still that's a pretty significant number, and it requires a paramount effort from your offense to get to 32 against this vaunted defense. Dallas scored 40 points on this team, and Dallas is the 3rd best scoring offense in football. It's possible to put a 40 burger on this defense. Green Bay scored 33 on this team, by far one of Aaron Rodgers' worst years as a pro. They were only the 14th best scoring offense. You're going against the best scoring offense with the best offensive player, the best player maybe in all of football, and Patrick Mahomes, and the best offensive mind in probably the history of the NFL, this side of Dan Fouts and Don Coryell when they were together. And that's Andy Reid. I think that works to our advantage, and I think that's being overlooked not by Dylan here is one of the best in the business, but by several other people that have talk shows and have punditry that probably shouldn't. The Chiefs, there's a statistic called the defense adjusted value over average, DVOA for short. Maybe some people are familiar with it. According to this, the Chiefs have the 1st best offensive DVOA in all of football with 25.2%. The next closest is Buffalo with 19%. Whereas Philly, they're 3rd with 15.1%. When that was broken up by passing and rushing, the passing DVOA for the Philly actually increased to 29% with Gardner Minshew, while their running decreased to 13.2 with Jalen Hurts in there. 29% dropped to 20 for the passing DVOA, and rushing increased phenomenally because it's Jalen Hurts. But I still think that can work to our advantage if we play our cards right. I also went back. I said on Monday in the video that came out yesterday, which was Tuesday, that more often than not, the best quarterback coach combination wins. So I went back and looked. This is more subjective, but in the last 10 years, I think the best quarterback coach combination went 7-3. In the last 20 years, the best quarterback coach went 13-7. So that's a 70% versus 65% winning percentage. I think the best quarterback coach combination here is Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. Um, you know, even more odds are working against us. I'm an MVP who makes the Super Bowl, has not won the Super Bowl since Kurt Warner in 1999. But you know what? We've already broken a Kurt Warner stat this year. Why not another? Why not win the Super Bowl? I think the best thing that could happen is the Eagles win the toss and defer because they want that valuable second half possession to start off the last half of the game. I think Chiefs jump to a quick lead, and I think that the battle ensues. I think our defense wins some, but not as much as the defense for Philadelphia. However, I think our offense scores a prolific amount of points. I think if we get to 30, we can win this game. I think in the final minutes, I think Chiefs score a touchdown. I think they leave just a few seconds on the board for Jalen Hurts Hail Mary. I don't think it's successful. I think Chiefs win 31-24. And I'm going to pull a Lee Corso here. Go Chiefs! I've got my Mahomes hair, my Mahomes wig. I'm not very superstitious, but I wore this all game in Super Bowl 54, and when I thought it was over, it wasn't over. And it's never over with Patrick Mahomes. I'm super pumped, Dylan. Let's go!
Would you say you're a little stitious?
No, I'm not superstitious at all. Not a little stitious. I'm just, I don't know. I maybe just stitious. I don't know.
Maybe just stitches.
Maybe just
I
stitious.
will say this. I had an easier job here because telling you why the Eagles are going to win is a heck of a lot easier than telling you why the Chiefs are going to win. But I think Christian just did the best job that could be done. I particularly enjoyed your going back and researching of the best head coach quarterback combos. That's very interesting. I would need to go look at that myself. I'm curious to see if we agree on who we thought the best duos were. I trust your opinion for them pretty much all the time, though. So I'll take your word for it. And I'm like, and that's a pretty good point. There's several things that I wanted to talk about that you mentioned. So the first one I just think is kind of funny, and you were talking about the Chiefs are the underdogs, and I think that they are, and I think they're going to have that mindset. But what's funny about the Eagles? They always think they're the underdogs. So I think both teams are coming to this game, and the Eagles are saying, because I think of the disrespect they've gotten all season, I think they're going to come to this game and be like, everyone, we might be considered by Vegas to be the favorites, but they're not going to have that mindset. They're going to come into this game and they're going to think that everyone in the world is picking against them because that's just the mindset they have. So I think it's going to make the game even better because both these teams are playing with house money, so to speak. They both are going to tell themselves that, hey, we're being counted down and out, and we're going to prove everyone wrong. And I think it's going to make the game that much better. When you talk about the refs and the penalties that the head official has called against the Eagles and the Chiefs, I think that actually hurts the Eagles more than it does the Chiefs because the Eagles, that's one area that they've been pretty weak in terms of penalties, especially along the offensive line. They actually led the league in offensive line penalties. And what's weird is it's really inconsistent. They'll go several weeks with just playing very sound fundamental football. Then they'll have one game, and this happened multiple times, where they'll have 8 false starts. Or Jason Kelsey, for some reason, multiple times this year, snapped the ball before Jalen Hurts is ready. And just random, just weird things like that. They cannot have that happen in the Super Bowl. If they do, I think for sure the Chiefs are going to win this game. And it doesn't help because the official seemingly doesn't like either team. I don't know what the deal is. But I think that typically in the Super Bowl, I feel like the refs tend to let the teams play it out a little bit more than they do in the regular season because it's the Super Bowl and nobody wants to watch a game with flags being thrown left and right and constant stoppages. The Super Bowl takes forever already.
You would think, but Super Bowl 55, I'll never forget it. They gave the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 85 free yards and then took away an interception from Tyrann Mathieu on what I think a BS call, but I'm a little bit biased. So you would think that they would let him play, but sometimes I don't know. Someone named Jeffers just feels like they shouldn't be playing, that he should be the star. And
Was he the ref of that game?
he was the ref. He was the head ref
Oh
of
my
that
gosh,
game. Yep.
that's
We are
not good for
0-1
the
when
Chiefs.
Carl Jeffers refs our Super Bowls.
Well, let's hope it's 0-2. And then I'm trying to think. There was like another point that I wanted to make. Now I can't remember what it was in regards to something that you had said. But I don't know. I just look at this. Well, one thing you were talking about was that you were saying that when you compare the Chiefs' run defense to their passing defense, I actually think that their run defense is a stronger part of their defense. Um, the numbers kind of support that. I mean, they're the eighth best run defense, but I think that you're kind of talking about if it turns into a passing game, you think it benefits the Chiefs if they get out to a fast start. The Eagles are the fastest starting team in the National Football League. In the Let's see, now they've played 19 games. They've scored a touchdown 10 of the 19 games that they've played on their opening drive, which leads the league. They are very quick to strike, and I honestly think and Nick Sirianni, he's listening, and I'm still like run the ball. I'm very much an advocate for running the football because I think we could wear down that run defense. I think we can control time of possession and keep Mahomes off the field. But I just have a feeling because I've watched every Eagles game for the last 8 years, and I'm gonna tell you right now, Nick Sirianni has to come out and be extremely aggressive in the passing game. I have a very strong feeling about that. I think if he does that, it's going to turn into an absolute shootout. I think the score could easily be one team might even hit 40, but both teams easily hit the 30s if it turns into a kind of a game like that. I think the Chiefs, that's exactly what they want, 100%, and I think it'll play right into their hands. That's why I don't want the Eagles to come out and have that approach. That being said, I do think the Eagles. I think that's other than the fact that their offensive line is the best in the league. I think you look at mismatches, and I think all day long that Eagles, the receivers going against that Chiefs secondary, I think is a massive mismatch. So,
I
but
would have been more
it'll come.
scared if I didn't watch video evidence of what happened to Jamar Chase last in the AFC Championship when he was basically a no-show. T. Higgins got his catches. T. Higgins is really good. He's going to get a nice fat paycheck this offseason. But I think our young secondary really shocked me with how well they played against a top 3 receiving core, maybe top 1. And I think that we're going to double A.J. Brown just like we did Jamar Chase, and we're going to force the other players to beat us.
Here's why that will not work against the Eagles, but it did work against the Bengals, and I 100% agree with you. Could not agree with you more. I think the Chiefs secondary has played freaking phenomenally well. When L'Jarius Sneed went down, I honestly that moment was the only time I thought I picked the Chiefs to win that game. I expected them to, but when he went down was the only time I was a little bit afraid, and that's because of how well he's played and these other guys around him. You talk about the young players. Um, Trent McDuffie's definitely, I feel like, played better in the playoffs. It seems like he's matured a lot. Uh, but you look at, and I don't know why, Jalen Watson, in the regular season, his coverage grade is really not good at all. And the safeties have been mediocre at best. I think you look at that. I think with the Bengals, you don't have to account for Joe Burrow taking off and running every single play. But I promise you, when you go against Philadelphia Eagles, every single play, if you drop back into man coverage, for sure, I promise you, Jalen Hurts is taking off. He's going to recognize that immediately, and when he does that, I guarantee you, he's going to gain 5, 6, 7 yards a clip each time that happens. I think if you go and double cover, I think the Eagles' ability to run the ball. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how much they change the calls at the line of scrimmage. Because I think if they start seeing the double coverage, and especially if they go into man for any reason, I think you're going to see that's when the Eagles' running game is going to open up and it will pick them apart. But I think with Dallas Goedert, his threat going across the middle, along with Devontae Smith, who's I think one of the best route runners in the league, team that with Jalen Hurts' running ability, and I honestly don't think you can double team any one player on the Eagles, or the other guys are going to kill you. Obviously, Joe Burrow, I think he did take advantage. There was that huge run of his, which I thought was one of the best plays of the game. I think it was like third down. I can't remember how many yards to go. It was at least 13, but I think it may have been even more. He had that great run that I thought was one of the best plays of the game. And that's Joe Burrow. So I think if you give the Eagles the same opportunity, I don't think it'll go the same way. And one thing you talked about is the greatness of Patrick Mahomes, which again could not agree more. But you talk about, and this is just me talking a little bit of smack right now, but you talk about go ahead and blitz him. Well, one, we're not going to have to because we're the best pass rush in the National Football League. We don't need to blitz. We'll get after you with 4 guys, probably 5. That's usually what we do. We always send the 5 guys, Hassan Reddick being the 5th. But it won't matter if he's outside the pocket or inside the pocket because that pass rush gets there so fast. That's been the most exciting thing for me to watch, which is saying a lot because the Eagles, I think, all the way around have been one of the most exciting teams in the league this year. But that pass rush is stellar, and I think it'll get there very quickly. But I think, I don't know, I think there's gonna be one heck of a matchup. Like literally, I think it's the best possible matchup for football fans. I've actually seen a lot of people complaining, which I feel like it's been about 50-50. But more people than I think should be are complaining about this matchup, and I don't understand it because I think it's the best possible matchup if you're looking for an exciting game in the National Football League. I do want to move on to the next segment, and I'm going to let you go first. And I don't know that you wrote this down or even did the research for it. I actually forgot and did not, so I'm pull out of my head here. But I want to know, who do you think actually, and this is totally unscripted. We're going to see it right here live. I want you to tell me who you think is going to win Super Bowl MVP. But then I want you to give me a dark horse candidate of who you think is going to win Super Bowl MVP. If you need time to
Excellent.
think about it, then I can't go first. But if you're ready, I want you to start.
I'm ready. You know
Okay.
why? Because Bart Scott said this was a rebuilding year and that we were going to miss the playoffs. No one expected us to be here. I can list like 5 pundits on all national legacy sports media that said we weren't going to make it here, and we did. We lost a Hall of Fame level wide receiver, and this guy passed for 54 or 5,200 yards, 41 touchdowns, 4 rushing touchdowns. If this were last year, I'd be concerned about this game because we couldn't figure out how to just take the checkdowns on cover 2. But you know what? This year, we lost Tyreek Hill. He takes checkdowns. We're throwing to running backs. We're throwing to wide receivers you never heard of. Throw out Marcus Kemp, practice squad player recently elevated. We'll throw him a ball. You know, it doesn't matter. It's going to be Patrick Mahomes if the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, because this team goes as he goes. He is truly our most valuable player. And if we win the Super Bowl, I would almost guarantee that he gets the Super Bowl MVP. My dark
Real
horse
quick,
candidate. Yep, go for
let's talk about Bart Scott for a second. And we should quote Travis Kelsey together here.
it.
And it's know your role and
Shut
shut your
your
mouth, you
mouth, you
jabroni.
jabroni.
Because let me tell you what, he's also said Jalen Hurts isn't a superstar and that people keep mixing that up. So he's really counted out both these teams, and he's making himself look like a fool because I think you talk about you should never count out the Kansas City Chiefs. I made the mistake. She's probably not watching. Her name's Kimberly DeWitt. She's a good friend of mine, her and her husband, back in Missouri. But we made a bet before the season began on who was going to win the AFC West. And I very mistakenly chose the Chargers. And any team other than the Kansas City Chiefs would have been a mistake. And I knew I was taking a risk when it happened. But you never count out the Kansas City Chiefs. I still thought they'd make the playoffs. But Bart Scott really just needs to focus on something else in retirement, apparently, because some of his takes are not really aging well. He was a great football player, but yeah, he's counting out the Kansas City Chiefs with the best head coach quarterback duo in the National Football League right now, hands down, and a guy and Travis Kelsey, who's a generational talent as well. And then on the other side, he's talking bad about what I believe will be the MVP runner-up in the National Football League this year in Jalen Hurts. But I'll
you
let you
know,
go with your dark horse candidate now.
And I know before the AFC Championship started, you actually picked the Cincinnati Bengals to win 27-24. But just so you know, folks, off the camera, he texted me that he's changing his pick. It was well before the game started, so it's counting. Dylan never underestimated the Chiefs, except at the beginning of the year, foolishly, but he's learned from his mistakes. My dark horse candidate for MVP, I'm going to say Chris Jones. If he gets to Jalen Hurts and disrupts Jalen Hurts against this offensive line, he's a dark horse MVP candidate. And you know what? We need him to do that. We need him to disrupt Jalen Hurts. We need him to put pressure on Jalen Hurts. We need Jalen Hurts to feel like he can't get out of the pocket. He can't stay in the pocket. He needs to throw the ball away. We need to force him into errant throws. I think if that's accomplished by Chris Jones, he is a dark horse MVP candidate.
Okay, our answers are the exact same basically, except for on opposite sides of the ball or opposite teams. Because I'm going with Jalen Hurts. Definitely, he's going to get MVP if the Eagles win this game, and it's because of his dual threat ability. I think he's going to have to play a fantastic game in order to win this game. He's going to have to make good decisions. He's going to have to know when to run the ball and when to be patient and let someone get open in the secondary, because I think it will happen. So I think that if the Eagles win, which I think they will, I think that he's for sure going to be the MVP, because I think that he'll probably throw for close to 300 yards or more, and he'll probably run for 50, 60 yards or more. My dark horse candidate, like I said, we're in agreement just on opposite sides of the ball. It's Hassan Reddick, which actually I saw a post about this. It was like if you bet $60, no, I think it was $30 on Hassan Reddick to win the Super Bowl MVP, and he wins it, then you win, like, I forget what it was. It was $500 or $600 because of how far down the list he is. And I think that's absurd given the fact that he's going to be lining up over Andrew Wiley, and he's not going to get much help from his guard either. I think that, and if they have Travis Kelce help chip him throughout the game, I actually think it's going to hurt the Chiefs, because he needs to be getting into his routes very early on, because he's going to be their go-to receiver all game long. When you talk about the Eagles having two of the top corners in the league, going against receivers who are really good, but not necessarily any of them. I don't think any of them are even in the top 10 for sure, in my opinion, on the outside. So it's going to be Travis Kelce is going to be a very impactful player. Because we just went through and did MVPs, we picked our teams, and who we also picked our teams to win. I'm gonna make us stop this, and I'm gonna say let's give one MVP pick for the other team. And for me, or actually, I'll do the same thing. I'll do MVP, and then I'm also gonna do dark horse MVP. So my MVP for the Chiefs is probably gonna be Patrick Mahomes, but I'm gonna go with Travis Kelce because I could see Travis Kelce having a 13 catch game just like he did a few weeks ago in the playoffs. I could see him doing the same thing again in this game because of how amazing he is and how much the Chiefs are going to need to rely on him to win this game. My dark horse, I'm kind of torn. For some reason, I'm feeling Jerick McKinnon just because I think that they will probably check it down a lot given how good the corners are for the Eagles. And honestly, when I've watched the Eagles play, I feel like that's one area they've been weak in. I think it's because we have Hassan Reddick playing linebacker and we're rushing him all the time. I've seen where they've made TJ Edwards come all the way across the field to cover either a tight end or a running back out of the backfield, which is pretty ignorant, honestly. I follow some guys on Twitter who they report on the Eagles. They do a great job. But they've pointed out multiple times how bad of a decision that is because obviously he's not going to be able – TJ Edwards is not as quick as some of these running backs or tight ends already. And when he's starting at an 8-yard disadvantage across the field, it's not going to go well. So hopefully Jonathan Gannon does not do that. But if it's not Jerick McKinnon, it'll be Pacheco for sure. I've seen the Eagles run defense at times not look great. When Jordan Davis plays, our run defense is pretty solid. So that's why I'm leaning towards McKinnon because I think it'll be more of he's the receiving back for the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think that he'll have plenty of opportunity when Jordan Davis is in. Power backs have not done nearly as well. So let's see what you got.
I'll try and be a little bit different too. I'll say my main MVP candidate is going to be Hassan Reddick. If he doesn't get 2 sacks this game, it's a deep shame. He should be cut and never play in the NFL again because he's going against Andrew Wiley, who I think is not a starting caliber right tackle. This year is just extenuating circumstances because we have our actual tackle who's been out with a severe injury the entire year. And I think that it's probably the weakest point on our offensive line. And if you're Hassan Reddick, you got to take advantage of that. That is the cream of the crop right there, apparently at right tackle position for us, and it's nothing compared to how skilled you are. And I think that if the Eagles win, I think he's going to have a huge impact on the game. Very likely a MVP candidate. My dark horse is AJ Brown. If AJ Brown beats the double team, which I think he will take, if he beats the double team, get 120 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns, 10 receptions, that's MVP caliber to me. There's only one time where I felt like a player had an amazing receiving game and didn't get the MVP. It went to the quarterback, and that was James White when he had 100 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns as a running back, and just went to Tom Brady because Tom Brady. I don't think that happens here because I don't think that Jalen Hurts, unfortunately, doesn't have the cachet that Tom Brady has. And if Tom Brady does anything, if he sniffs glue, that glue is going to go on eBay for $1,000,000 because it's Tom Brady. Jalen Hurts is not there. But A.J. Brown, if that happens, if he has 100 receiving yards, if he has a James White game where he has 3 touchdowns, 100 and some odd receiving yards, 10 receptions, I think he's a dark horse MVP candidate.
Yeah, I think I'd be surprised if any. I think if the Chiefs are, I mean, sorry, the Eagles are scoring touchdowns through the air, I think it's going to have to be spread about because the Chiefs are very. They may not have the most talented secondary, but I feel like the discipline within the coaching for the Kansas City Chiefs is pretty dang good. And I don't see them just allowing AJ Brown to just go off for 3 touchdowns in a Super Bowl game. But so part of me almost thinks that Devontae Smith would be. I'd lean more towards him personally, just because I think the Chiefs know how good, especially in the red zone, AJ Brown can be. But yeah, well, that's pretty much it for today's show. But my goodness, Christian, I'm so excited. I wish that we could watch this game together. Christian's in Arizona right now. I'm in Idaho, so there's quite the distance between us. But I'm sure neither one of us will probably be texting that much during the game because
Nope.
I know how locked in you get, and I'm gonna be glued to my TV. My roommate's wanting to throw a party, and I'm like, you can throw a party. I'm gonna be, if you do though, I'm gonna probably be in my room watching it on my laptop because I just don't want to miss a single second in this game. I don't want to be distracted from anything because both of us have, as a fans, have come up through the league. I started off as a St. Louis Rams fan before Kroenke definitely killed my appetite for anything Rams. But both of us have known the heartaches of years upon years of not even like mediocre teams, but just downright awful teams. We know how lucky we are to be fans of teams that are in this position. And above anything else in this game, what I'm hoping for is health for all the players. And I'm hoping for one heck of a game and an Eagles win. But that is the hope for this year's Super Bowl. I hope you guys are excited as we are to watch this game. I promise you this is going to be one of the best Super Bowls we've seen in a very long time. And that's it. I'll let Christian go ahead and put on. I knew you were going to do something.
Let's go.
Yep. So I'm very excited. I know after the game is over, I know we'll have mutual respect either way it goes. But definitely excited. I'm super thrilled to see the team from my home state playing against my favorite team and also my best friend's team. So this is going to be fantastic. But guys, sit back. We won't be back until after the Super Bowl is over. So I hope you enjoy the game and enjoy time with your friends and family, and just enjoy the best Super Bowl you're going to see in a long time.
Chiefs.